Welcome, traveler. Settle in and let the world grow quiet around you. Tonight, I will tell you everything we know about the Dwemer civilization and the greatest mystery in all of Tamriel, their sudden, complete disappearance in the year 1E700. An entire race of Mer, the most technologically advanced civilization Nirn has ever seen, vanished in a single instant, leaving behind only their empty cities, their tireless automatons, and piles of ash where living beings once stood. They sought to become gods by harnessing the Heart of Lorkhan itself, and in that moment of ultimate ambition, they were erased from existence. Every last one of them, save for a single survivor who was not there to witness the end. 3,000 years later, we still do not know if they succeeded or failed, if they achieved transcendence or annihilation, if they escaped to another realm or were punished by the gods they defied. And if you genuinely enjoy this kind of dark storytelling, consider subscribing and liking the channel, but only if you like the content. Settle yourself here beside me, where the shadows gather at the edge of firelight, and let the cold winds of Skyrim howl beyond these walls, while I speak to you of ancient days and vanished peoples. There are mysteries that haunt this land, secrets buried deep within mountains of ice and stone, and none so profound as the fate of those we call the Dwemer. Though they were known by other names in older tongues, names whispered with respect and dread: the Deep Elves, the Dwarves, the people of the Deep, the Under-Elves, and the Deep Folk. In the year 1E700, during the cataclysmic Battle of Red Mountain in the land now known as Morrowind, this entire race of Mer vanished from the face of Nirn in a single, inexplicable instant. Their cities remained, their mechanical servants continued their eternal patrols, their tools lay where they had been set down, but the Dwemer themselves were gone, every last one of them, save for a single soul we shall speak of in time. And so the greatest mystery in all of Tamriel was born, one that has consumed scholars, mages, and adventurers for thousands of years, one that may never be unraveled, for the truth of what happened that day was swallowed along with its architects into an abyss from which no answers have ever returned. Allow me to speak first of the Dwemer themselves, for to understand the nature of their disappearance, you must understand the nature of their civilization and the peculiar philosophy that drove them to both greatness and, ultimately, oblivion. The Dwemer were a race of elves, descended from the ancient Aldmer, like their cousins the Altmer, Bosmer, and Chimer, yet they diverged in ways that set them apart from all other Mer upon Nirn. They established their civilization primarily in the region of Dwemerith, which constitutes northeastern Morrowind, though their reach extended far across Tamriel, with significant settlements in Skyrim, Hammerfell, and High Rock. Unlike the other races of Mer, the Dwemer turned away from the worship of the Aedra and Daedra alike. They did not deny the existence of the gods, for they were not atheists in the truest sense, but they refused to worship them, viewing the divines as powerful beings, unworthy of veneration, obstacles to be overcome, rather than entities to be revered. They placed their faith in themselves and in their work, in reason and logic, and the cold precision of metal and stone. The Dwemer were master craftsmen and engineers whose technological achievements remain unrivaled even in the Fourth Era, more than 3,000 years after their disappearance. They built vast underground cities of stone and brass, with intricate systems of pipes, gears, and steam-powered mechanisms that continue to function to this day. Their architectural style favored sharp, angular designs, intensely mathematical in nature, and their mastery of stonework formed the foundation of structures that have remained standing through the ages because of the knowledge passed down among their architects and city planners. They developed methods of blending magic and mechanics together in ways that even the most learned scholars cannot fully comprehend, creating wonders that the other civilizations of their time could not even dream of. Among their most significant inventions were the animunculi, the mechanical automatons that served as guardians, laborers, and war machines. The small, skittering dwarven spiders with their flexible gas bags and 6 hinged legs, the dwarven spheres that patrolled in spherical form until encountering an opponent, at which point they emerged as fully armed and armored fighters, and the massive dwarven centurions, the largest and most formidable of their creations, designed in the form of armored warriors with extendable maces and bladed arms. These constructs were powered by soul gems and driven by steam, and though they contain no true life, they continue to maintain their creators' abandoned cities with unfailing diligence. But now, let us speak of the philosophical underpinnings that defined the Dwemer and ultimately shaped their fate, for this is crucial to understanding why they did what they did. The Dwemer were, by the measure of our modern eyes, a remarkably unlikable people in many ways, as the scholar Hasfat Antibalus once wrote. They were ruthless in their pragmatism, dismissive of emotion and sentiment, and driven by an absolute dedication to their vision of transcendence. They denied both phenomena and noumena, the world as it appears to the senses and the world as it truly is, viewing both as illusions of the Godhead Anu. They believed that everything, including themselves, was unreal and false, and they sought to change reality itself to better accommodate and validate their existence. This nihilistic worldview drove them to pursue a singular goal: to escape the limitations of the mortal plane, to transcend the mundane restrictions of mundus, and to achieve a form of divinity or existence that placed no constraints upon them. They did not merely wish to become gods, they wished to surpass them entirely, to become something greater than the Aetheta who had shaped the world. I shall now turn your attention to the remarkable technology known as tonal architecture, for this was the means by which the Dwemer hoped to achieve their ambitions, and it lies at the heart of their disappearance. Tonal architecture is the manipulation of sound to alter reality itself. The Dwemer understood that the original sound was made with the creation of the Orbis and spans over all existence, that everything in the world is part of a great song, and that by altering that song, one could alter reality. The tonal architects of the Dwemer could shape tones through their own vocalizations, amplified by magical torques, and they wore protective headgear known as Dwemeri tonal attenuators to protect their ears and thought organs from the harmonic feedback fluctuations of their work. They exhibited near total mastery of tonal forces, using them in mining, medicine, architecture, and even psychology, employing complex oral hypnosis to bend weaker minds to their will. Their greatest creations utilized tonal forces, including the tonal resonators that opened doors and gates when their spinning harmonics reached a particular frequency, and the devices that powered their cities and fueled their research. But the Dwemer's ambitions reached far beyond the construction of cities and automatons. Somewhere in the depths of Red Mountain, in the land that was then called Resdayn, Dwemer miners discovered something that would change the course of history: a great magical stone that the Dwemer tonal architect Lord Kagrenac determined by diverse methods to be the Heart of Lorkhan. This artifact was the divine spark of the deity, most commonly known by his Aldmeri name Lorkhan, the creator trickster tester deity who convinced or contrived the original spirits to bring about the creation of Mundus. According to myth, Lorkhan was killed by the other Aedra for his role in creating the mortal plane, and when Trinimac and Auriel tried to destroy his heart, it laughed at them, saying that it was the heart of the world. And so Auriel fastened the heart to an arrow and shot it far into the sea, where it crashed into what would become the island of Vardenfell, forming the volcano we call Red Mountain. There it remained for ages, hidden from all who sought it, until the Dwemer found it in the early First Era. Let me tell you now of Kagrenac, the chief tonal architect and high priest of the Dwemer, for he was the architect of his people's fate. When the Heart of Lorkhan was discovered, Kagrenac set about finding a way to access its divine power. He understood that the heart was not merely a source of power, but a metaphysical key, a link to the very foundations of reality, and he believed he could use it to achieve the Dwemer's dream of transcendence. To this end, he created 3 legendary tools: the Gauntlet Wraithguard, the Hammer Sunder, and the Dagger Keening. Each tool served a specific purpose to siphon the power of the heart via tonal manipulation of the laws of nature. Wraithguard was created to safely wield the weapon tools, for without its protection, wielding Keening or Sunder would lead to the instant death of the user as the unnatural power of the tools destroyed them. Sunder was enchanted to strike the heart and produce the exact volume and quality of power desired, rendering a single pure tone. Keening then shattered this tone into lesser tones, allowing the power to be manipulated and shaped. With these tools, Kagrenac planned to tap the heart's power and use it to fuel his greatest creation, the Numidium. And so we come to the Numidium, also called Anumidium, the Brass God, the Prime Gestalt, the Brass Tower, and Walk Brass. This was a colossal construct, a humanoid golem said to have been 1,000 feet tall, designed to serve as a new god for the Dwemer people. The Numidium was not merely a war machine, though it would be used as one with devastating effect. It was intended to be a vessel of tonal perfection, an artificial god that could rival the Aedra themselves. The Dwemer sought to use the Heart of Lorkhan to power this construct, and, in doing so, to grant themselves immortality, divinity, or something even greater, the nature of which remains unclear. Some accounts suggest that the Numidium was designed to make the Dwemer immortal by attaching them to the power of the heart. Others claim it was meant to allow them to transcend Mundus entirely, to escape the mortal plane and become something beyond subgradients, beyond the divisions and limitations that bound all other beings to the world. Allow me to tell you about the events that led directly to the disappearance, for the creation of the Numidium did not go unnoticed, and it sparked a conflict that would end with the Dwemer's vanishing. At that time, the Dwemer shared the land of Resdain with the Chimer, the ancestors of the Dark Elves who would become the Dunmer. The two races had formed an alliance under the First Council, the first united nation of Dunmeri people, and this alliance was held together for hundreds of years by the friendship between the Chimer Lord Indoril Nerevar and the Dwemer King Dumak. But this peace was shattered when Vorin Dagoth, Lord of House Dagoth, and trusted as a friend by both Nerevar and the Dwemer, brought proof to the Chimer that Kagrenac had discovered the Heart of Lorkhan and was building a new god, a mockery of Chimer faith and a fearsome weapon. The Chimer viewed this as an abomination, a profane attempt to achieve godhood through sacrilege, and they urged Nerevar to make war on the Dwemer and destroy this threat. Nerevar was troubled by this revelation. He went to his friend Dumak and asked if what Dagoth had said was true, but Kagrenac took great offense at the accusation and asked whom Nerevar thought he was, that he might presume to judge the affairs of the Dwemer. Still troubled, Nerevar made pilgrimage to Holamayan, the sacred temple of Azura, and the Daedric prince confirmed that all that Dagoth said was indeed true, and that the creation of a new god of the Dwemer should be prevented at all costs. And so began the War of the First Council, a conflict that lasted approximately 32 years and had drastic consequences for both the Dwemer and the Chimer. Yet there is more to tell of this war, for it was not fought between the Dwemer and Chimer alone. Let me speak of the other forces that were drawn into the conflict. Nordic legend recounts that their ancestors desired to intervene in the war and reclaim Morrowind from the Chimer, whom they called devils, but they were hesitant to intervene without a strong leader. Then the Devil of Dagoth, as the Nords called Vorin Dagoth, came to them under a flag of peace and told them of the Heart of Lorkhan, which to the Nords was the Heart of Shor, their chief god. The Ash King Wolfhearth was resurrected as Shor's avatar and amassed an army comprising Nords, Orcs, and forces of House Dagoth to obtain the heart. And so multiple armies converged on Red Mountain, the Chimer led by Nerevar and his generals Vivek, Almalexia, Sothasil, and Vorin Dagoth, the Dwemer led by Dumak and Kagrenac, and the Nords and Orcs led by Wulfharth. The battle was vast and terrible, and accounts of what happened that day conflict in many details, for the truth was obscured by the cataclysm that followed. I must now turn your attention to the moment of the disappearance itself, for here we arrive at the crux of the mystery. What is known with certainty is that during the Battle of Red Mountain in the year 1E 700, Kagrenac used his tools upon the Heart of Lorkhan in some manner that caused every Dwemer on Nirn to vanish instantly and completely. The exact nature of what he did remains unclear. Some accounts state that Nerevar, Dagoth, and a small group of companions made their way into the heart chamber beneath the dwarven citadel by secret means, where Nerevar met Dumak, and both collapsed from grievous wounds and draining magics. With Dumak fallen and threatened by Dagoth and others, Kagrenac turned his tools upon the heart, and Nerevar said he saw Kagrenac and all his Dwemer companions at once disappear from the world. In that instant, Dwemer everywhere disappeared without a trace. Other accounts suggest that Azura herself, speaking through Nerevar, utilized the heart to make the Dwemer disappear as punishment for their sacrilege. Still others hold that the Dwemer destroyed themselves, that Kagrenac's action was not interrupted by enemies, but was completed as he intended, and that the result, whether transcendence or annihilation, was the outcome he sought. The book Divine Metaphysics explains how to create a god through sorcery, and the Egg of Time argues that it is not dangerous to interrupt a link to a divine source of power, though the sudden and near-total disappearance of the Dwemer suggests quite the contrary. What Nerevar told his generals was that the Dwemer had used special tools to turn their people into immortals, and that the Heart of Lorkhan held wondrous powers, though Dagoth believed the Dwemer had been destroyed, not made immortal. But consider this troubling evidence. When the previously untouched Dwemer ruins of Bams Amshend in Mournhold were rediscovered many years later, numerous piles of ashes were present next to weapons and armor, on chairs, and in beds, suggesting the Dwemer's bodies were suddenly reduced to ash in some way. And throughout the ancient abandoned ruins, travelers encountered dwarven ghosts, aggressive revenant spirits of Dwemer that are present on the mortal plane. These observations suggest that the Dwemer did not escape Nirn, but were killed, their bodies turned to ash, and their spirits bound to the ruins they once inhabited. Yet if they were simply killed, why do no bodies remain? Why only ash and ghosts? And what force could have killed every Dwemer on Nirn at the same instant, regardless of where they were? If you're still with me after hearing this, hit that like and subscribe button. Here is where I must speak of theories, for the truth of the Dwemer's fate remains unknown, and scholars have proposed many possible explanations. One prominent theory suggests that the Dwemer achieved exactly what they sought: transcendence. By using the tools on the heart, Kagrenac succeeded in his endeavor, and the Dwemer were transformed into something beyond mortal existence, perhaps becoming the skin of the Numidium itself, their spirits merging into a single oversoul forever bound to the brass god. This would explain why the Numidium has such devastating power and why it causes dragon breaks, fractures in time, whenever it is activated. If the Numidium wears the Dwemer's collective ideology of nihilism and disbelief on its divine skin, then it would be a weapon of absolute denial, refuting not only itself, but all of existence along with it. Another theory, equally troubling, suggests that the Dwemer suffered zero-sum in the metaphysical understanding of the Elder Scrolls universe. Chim is the realization that the world is a dream in the mind of the Godhead, the ultimate divine being, and the ability to maintain one's sense of self despite that knowledge. But if a being realizes the truth and cannot assert their individuality, they undergo zero-sum, essentially being wiped from existence, not merely killed but erased so that they never existed in the first place. It is possible that in his attempt to make the Dwemer divine, Kagrenac succeeded, but in doing so revealed to them the true nature of the universe. Unable to handle that reality, which seems plausible for such a scientifically minded race that sought certainty in all things, they underwent zero-sum and vanished. Yet this theory has its flaws, for if the Dwemer were truly zero-summed, all evidence of their existence would also be erased, and we would have no ruins, no ghosts, no artifacts. There are those who believe that the Dwemer were not killed or transformed, but displaced, transported to another realm of existence from which they may someday return. The tribunal god Vivek believed that the disappearance was in some way owed to their divine sin, their attempt to create a god for their own purposes from the remains of the god Lorkhan. Whether their use of Kagrenac's tools in this process or simply their intentions resulted in their extinction remains unclear in this interpretation, but it suggests that the gods themselves may have punished the Dwemer for their hubris. Others suggest that the Dwemer were spirited away to an outer realm of oblivion or to some plane beyond the Orbis entirely, where they continue to exist beyond the reach of mortal knowledge. I shall now turn to the matter of a particular scholar whose work bears directly on this mystery, for in the Fourth Era, at the College of Winterhold in Skyrim, a Breton mage named Arniel Gain attempted to recreate the circumstances of the Dwemer's disappearance. Arniel was secretive about his research, but with the assistance of an adventurer, he obtained various Dwemer artifacts, cogs for his studies, a warped soul gem to serve in place of the Heart of Lorkhan, and the blade Keening itself, which had somehow found its way to Skyrim from Morrowind. Arniel then conducted his experiment, striking the warped soul gem with Keening and attempting to discover how and why the Dwemer disappeared. The experiment succeeded. After a fashion, upon striking the soul gem a third time, Arniel vanished in a flash of light, never to be seen again, strengthening the theory that Kagrenac's use of the tools was indeed the cause of the disappearance. Yet questions remain about Arniel's fate. A warped soul gem is not the heart of a god. Arniel used only one of the three tools, lacking Sunder and Wraithguard. The experiment was not conducted at a tower, which may have been important to the original ritual, and so it is possible that Arniel's result was different from that of the Dwemer, that he did not achieve transcendence or zero-sum but something else entirely. When Arniel disappeared, he left behind a conjuration spell that allows those who knew him to summon his shade, suggesting that some part of him remains bound to the mortal plane, his soul perhaps trapped within the gem he struck or transported to some other realm. If this is what happened to a single mage, using a fraction of the original tools, what happened to an entire race using all three upon the heart of a god? But enough of theories and speculation. Allow me to tell you about the only Dwemer who did not disappear, for his existence is perhaps the most tantalizing clue we have about the fate of his people. His name is Yagrum Bagarn, and he is the last known living Dwemer. Yagrum was a master crafter in the service of Kagrenac, one of his trusted engineers, though he did not work directly on the Numidium project. At the time of the disappearance, Yagrum was not on Nirn. He was traveling in an outer realm, an undescribed plane of oblivion, conducting research or exploring beyond the boundaries of the mortal world. When he returned to Tamriel, he found his people gone. Yagrum has spent thousands of years searching for his people, traveling across Nirn in the hope of finding another survivor, but he has never encountered a single other Dwemer. At some point during his long life, he returned to Red Mountain and contracted the Corpus disease, a terrible affliction created by Dagoth that bloated and deformed his body until he could only move with the help of a modified centurion spider's lower half. He eventually came under the care of the ancient Telvanni wizard Devaith, Fire, who cured much of his dementia and continues to try various harmless spells and potions to cure him of Corpus, though none have succeeded. Yagrum remains in Telfire to this day, his mind slowly recovering, his hope of finding his people fading, but never entirely extinguished. When asked about the disappearance of the dwarves, Yagrum has admitted that he cannot say what happened. He was not there. He has theories, as do all who study the matter, but he has no certainty. He knows that Kagrenac was working with the Heart of Lorkhan, and that the tools were designed to tap its power, but whether the result was destruction, transformation, or transportation to another realm, he cannot say. Some who have consulted him have brought him ancient texts for translation, including divine metaphysics and the Egg of Time, and he has analyzed their contents, but he has found no definitive answer. The mystery that has consumed scholars for 3,000 years has consumed him as well, and he has been alone in this world since the day he returned from the outer realm to find his entire civilization erased. I must now turn your attention to a dark chapter in Dwemer history, for the Dwemer were not only architects of their own fate, but perpetrators of a great crime against another race, a crime whose victims still haunt their ruins to this day. I speak of the Falmer, the Snow Elves, a proud and prosperous race of Mer who once inhabited all of Skyrim and created a very advanced society that nearly rivaled that of the Altmer of the Somerset Isles. The Snow Elves lived in the sunlight, their skin and hair pale white, their magic powerful, their resistance to frost so great that they were immune to cold and could live comfortably in ice caverns. But their civilization was destroyed when the Nords invaded Skyrim, led by Ysgramor and his 500 companions, who sought vengeance for the Night of Tears, a massacre of the human settlement at Sarthal by the Snow Elves. The Nords waged a brutal war of extermination against the Snow Elves, driving them from their lands and slaughtering them by the thousands. Facing extinction, the surviving Snow Elves turned to the Dwemer for help. The two races had always maintained an uneasy alliance, and the Snow Elves hoped their elven cousins would grant them refuge in their underground cities. The Dwemer agreed, but at a terrible price. They forced the Snow Elves to consume toxic fungi that grew in the deep places of the earth, fungi that gradually destroyed their sight over generations. The Dwemer did not trust their guests, and they wished to render them helpless. Once the Snow Elves were blind, the Dwemer forced them into slavery, using them as laborers and servants. Ancient torture chambers found in Dwemer ruins are suspected to have been used to keep their elven brethren in line. The Dwemer's treachery was so deep, so complete, that they made the fungi an essential part of the Falmer's diet, guaranteeing the weakness of not only their current thralls, but their offspring as well. The Snow Elves, for time eternal, would be blind. Over time, the servants became slaves in truth, their history lost as they devolved into increasingly primal creatures. The majestic Snow Elves were rendered powerless, twisted by centuries of darkness and torment into the blind, merciless, and savage beings now known simply as the Falmer. But as is always the story with slaves and their masters, the Falmer eventually rebelled. Generations after they first sought solace among the Dwemer and experienced bitter betrayal, the Falmer rose up against their oppressors. They overthrew the Dwemer and fled even further down into the deepest, most hidden reaches of the underground realm known as Blackreach. For decade upon decade, the two sides waged a bitter conflict, a full-fledged and bloody war that came to be known as the War of the Crag. This war raged deep below the surface of Skyrim, completely unbeknownst to the 10 Nords above, a war whose battles and heroes must forever remain lost to our knowledge. The War of the Crag continued until the year 1E700, when the Snow Elves came to face the Dwemer in battle and found that their enemies had completely disappeared. The war ended not with victory or defeat, but with absence, with emptiness, with the sudden and inexplicable vanishing of an entire civilization. Finally free from the threat of their Dwemer overlords, the Falmer were able to spread freely throughout Blackreach. But years of fighting the dwarves had left them bloodthirsty and brutal. Feeling the need to conquer, to kill, they began mounting raids to the surface world. And so the legends began of small, blind, goblin-like creatures who would rise from the cracks of the earth in the dead of night to slaughter cattle, attack lonely travelers, and steal sleeping babes from their cribs. In recent years, the sightings of these creatures have become more and more frequent, their raids more organized, their attacks more brutal, and some scholars have come to believe that the Falmer are ready to change once again, ready to reclaim their long-forgotten glory and make war upon those who dwell in the light. Yet there is more to tell of the Snow Elves, for not all of them accepted the Dwemer's offer and suffered the fate of the betrayed. Allow me to speak of those who escaped that doom. When the Dwemer made their offer of refuge, splinter groups formed to search for alternate solutions. These elves sought out other alliances, but ultimately most were slaughtered, vanished, or gave in and accepted the Dwemer's terms. However, there were Snow Elves residing in the Chantry of Ariel, an isolated temple dedicated to their chief deity, who heard of the plan to seek asylum with the Dwemer too late. By the time news reached them, they could do nothing to stop their kin from accepting the bargain. These few remaining Snow Elves look upon their twisted brethren with pity and call them the betrayed, while they themselves retain the name Snow Elf and maintain their ancient ways of worship. In the Fourth Era, travelers in the remote mountains of Skyrim encountered one of these survivors, a knight paladin named Gelebor, who has lived for thousands of years in the hidden vale where the Chantry stands. Gelebor believes that there may be other isolated conclaves of Snow Elves hidden around Tamriel, uncorrupted survivors who escaped both the Nords and the Dwemer's treachery. But now, let us speak of other conflicts that shaped the Dwemer civilization in Skyrim. For the War of the Crag was not the only underground war they fought in secret from the surface world. I must tell you of the Aetherium Wars, a conflict that may have contributed to the Dwemer's eventual downfall. Sometime after 1E221, the Dwemer of Skyrim discovered a considerable source of raw Aetherium in Blackreach. Aetherium is a rare, blue luminescent crystal with extraordinarily powerful magical properties, so potent that it is almost impossible to work with without the proper tools. The Dwemer believed that Aetherium came from meteorites that broke off from Aetherius, the immortal plane where magic originated, meaning the mineral could stem from the afterlife itself. Upon discovering this treasure, the Dwemer established an alliance between 4 major city-states to research the crystal and develop new technologies. Arkantam's in the Reach served as the primary research facility and command center. Ralbtar, located directly above Blackreach, concerned itself with mining operations. Mzulft was used as a storage site, and Batharzel, now known as Deep Folk Crossing, served purposes that remain unclear but was likely an experimentation facility. The research into the crystal was a major success. The Dwemer constructed the Aetherium Forge, a massive underground facility located deep beneath the ruins of Bathoft, ancient even by Dwemer standards, at least 4,000 years. Old by the time of the Fourth Era, this forge could use Aetherium to create unique magical artifacts of immense power, imbued from the moment of their creation with enchantments that rival any found in Tamriel. But the Dwemer alliance shattered almost immediately after these successes, as the 4 city-states and their rivals attempted to claim the forge for themselves. The conflict that followed became known as the Aetherium Wars, and it lasted for several decades, devastating the Dwemer states and leaving them weakened. Scholars believe this internal strife was the primary reason for the sudden collapse of the Dwemer holds in Skyrim, which in turn paved the way for High King Gelir's conquests. When the Nords under Gelir attacked, the Dwemer cities that had long withstood sieges suddenly fell within 3 years of each other. The Nords believed this was due to their king's strategic genius, but the truth was that the Dwemer had already broken themselves fighting over Aetherium. I shall now turn to the matter of the vast underground realm known as Blackreach, for this is one of the greatest wonders the Dwemer left behind, and understanding it helps us comprehend the scale of their civilization. Blackreach, known in Dwemeris as Falzardum Din, which translates to Blackest Kingdom Reaches, is an immense cavern system located deep beneath the surface of Skyrim, extending beneath all 9 holds of the province. The cavern is rich in minerals, including rare geode veins, and a subterranean river flows through it. Many giant glowing mushrooms grow throughout, providing natural light, their stalks taller than the buildings themselves in some places. The ceiling of the entire cave system glows with blue bioluminescent lights, and massive glowing vines hang down or float upward near certain areas. The large chunks of glowing crystals scattered throughout Blackreach are believed to be Aetherium lodes, the source of the material that sparked the Aetherium Wars. The Dwemer took advantage of this massive cavern system to build cities, roads, and infrastructure that allowed them to operate independently from the surface. They constructed great lifts to provide quick transport between Blackreach and the world above, and they connected multiple cities through the cavern's passages. Alftend, Mzinchaleft, and Ralbdathar all had entrances to Blackreach, though accessing them required an attunement sphere, a Dwemer device designed to unlock the mechanisms that concealed the passages. Within Blackreach, the Dwemer built the Silent City, a sprawling urban center with multiple buildings including the Debate Hall, the Hall of Rumination, a farm overseer's house, a pumping station, and war quarters. They farmed mushrooms in the damp environment and installed dwarven centurions to guard the roads. The Tower of Mzark, located in Blackreach, contained one of the Dwemer's most remarkable devices, an oculary designed to store and protect artifacts of great significance and power, including an Elder Scroll. This device could even transfer the knowledge of an Elder Scroll onto a lexicon, allowing it to be read without going mad or blind. Allow me to tell you about these ocularies, for they represent the pinnacle of Dwemer ingenuity. These were large, stationary, and highly advanced constructions that relied on both magic and technology to function, and they were designed for a variety of purposes. The oculary in Mzulft was designed to collect starlight, analyze it, and transmute it into projectable energy, which it then used to project a map of Tamriel, highlighting the locations of significant and powerful magical artifacts. The mechanisms required precise calibration using heat and frost magic to focus the lenses, and even after thousands of years, they remained functional with the proper adjustments. These devices demonstrate that the Dwemer's understanding of both magical and natural forces far exceeded that of any other civilization in Tamriel's history. But now, let us speak of the Dwemer's unique approach to magic and science, for they did not view these as separate disciplines, but as different aspects of a single truth. The Dwemer used steam-powered machinery in ways that no other race has ever replicated. Their automatons were powered by soul gems and driven by complex systems of pipes, gears, and boilers that converted water to steam. Yet these machines also incorporated magical elements that cannot be explained by mechanical principles alone. Some scholars have noted that centurions taken from Vardenfell shut down after a certain distance from Red Mountain is maintained, and they activate again when brought back within this radius. This suggests that some sort of signal emanating from the Dwemer's underground colonies keeps the animunculi active, a signal that has continued for over 3,000 years without any Dwemer to maintain it. The constructs also appear to have the ability to power up, emitting colored glows from the runes engraved on their metal plating. Dwarven spiders can emit small electric barriers that they use to charge up, turning their runes blue, and this barrier alerts other nearby constructs to absorb power as well. Constructs charged in this manner can fire off bursts of electricity to attack invaders, and when they are destroyed, they violently explode, releasing their stored energy. I must now turn your attention to the Dwemer metal itself, for this material hides secrets that speak to the Dwemer's philosophy and their mastery of tonal architecture. The process by which Dwemer metal was created remains a mystery, but scholars have inferred clues from its properties. Dwemer metal is stronger than most materials in Tamriel, surpassed only by orichalcum and ebony, both of which come directly from the gods. Yet Dwemer metal has a unique ability that neither of those substances possesses. It does not rust, despite sitting in abandoned ruins for over 3,000 years. Exposed to moisture, steam, and the elements, Dwemer artifacts remain as pristine as the day they were forged. This is likely due to the way the metal was created using tonal architecture, altering the very nature of the material so that it exists outside the normal flow of time. Time on Nirn only exists because it is a construct of Akatosh, the dragon god of time, and Dwemer metal survives in spite of time because it was made to deny the god's power over it. This perfectly encapsulates what the Dwemer strived for, the belief that the limitations of reality were not constraints to be accepted, but obstacles to be overcome through their own ingenuity. Yet there is more to tell of the Dwemer's philosophical opposition to the divine order. The Dwemer not only refused to worship the gods, but actively sought to demonstrate that they could surpass them. They believed that their spirits were not synthetic constructs, lesser gradients of divinity created by the gods, but beings capable of ascending to divine status through their own efforts. They denied phenomena and noumena alike, viewing the distinction between appearance and reality as meaningless because both were illusions of the godhead Anu. In their denial of both, they found comfort in the creation of animunculi, which combined two incompatible principles and thus denied both, matter and magic, working in concert to produce something that defied easy categorization. This philosophical stance may have been the key to their technological achievements, for by refusing to accept the world as it was, they were driven to reshape it according to their own vision. Allow me to speak now of the scholars who have dedicated their lives to studying the Dwemer, for their work has preserved much of what we know about this vanished race. In the Fourth Era, the foremost authority on Dwemer research is Calcelmo, a scholar of Markarth who has spent decades excavating the ruins of Nchuan Zel beneath Understone Keep. Calcelmo has assembled one of the most comprehensive collections of Dwemer artifacts in Tamriel, and has made significant progress in translating Dwemerus, the Dwemer language. His nephew Akentar assists him in his research, and together they have managed to reverse engineer some Dwemer technology, even controlling automatons by readjusting their mechanisms. Yet even Calcelmo admits that the Dwemer remain largely incomprehensible, that their true nature defies understanding by the standards of later eras. They meddled with and manipulated the very laws of reality to fit their own needs, constructed machines that allowed ordinary individuals to catch glimpses of infinity and all of time without adverse effects, and built complexes and cities that spiraled beyond space and time in ways that cannot be fully grasped. But the dangers of Dwemer ruins should not be underestimated, for those who venture into these ancient places often do not return. Nchuan Zel itself claimed the lives of an entire expedition of Markarth mages and imperial soldiers who ventured inside against Calcelmo's advice. Their journals were later found scattered throughout the ruins, telling the tale of their doom at the hands of Falmer, who had infested the city. Alftand, a ruin southwest of Winterhold, similarly claimed an expedition whose members can be found dead throughout the ruin, killed by Falmer, automatons, or madness. The few survivors of that expedition are not in any state to provide useful information, driven to hostility by their experiences in the depths. Even the brilliant alchemist Sindarian, who traveled to Blackreach to study the crimson nirnroot that grows only in that cavern, died there, his field laboratory found by later explorers, with his research notes detailing his work. I shall now turn to the nature of the calling, for this is one of the most intriguing and least understood aspects of Dwemer society. According to the ancient tales of the Dwemer, they possessed an ability referred to as the calling, which was similar to telepathy, allowing them to communicate with each other over great distances. A prevailing theory suggests that the calling was used by Kagrenac in the moments before the race's mass disappearance. Whatever he saw or did when he used the tools upon the Heart of Lorkhan may have been communicated to all of his people at the same time, resulting in their simultaneous vanishing. This would explain how every Dwemer on Nirn disappeared at once, regardless of where they were or what they were doing. Miners in Blackreach, soldiers at Red Mountain, craftsmen in Hammerfell, all of them linked by the calling to Kagrenac's final act, all of them swept away together. Yet there are accounts that complicate this theory, for the Dwemer's disappearance affected their entire race except for those who were beyond the reach of the calling. Yagrum Bagarn survived because he was in an outer realm at the time, beyond the boundaries of Mundus where the problem calling could not reach him. This suggests that whatever Kagrenac did affected only those Dwemer who were within the mortal plane, connected to each other through their telepathic bond. It also raises the question of whether there might be other survivors, Dwemer who were in oblivion or other planes of existence at the moment of the disappearance. If so, they have never been found, and Yagrum Bagarn's thousands of years of searching have never revealed another living member of his race. Allow me to tell you about the book Divine Metaphysics, for this text is one of the few surviving records of Kagrenac's own writings, and it speaks directly to his intentions with the Heart of Lorkhan. Divine Metaphysics explains how the Dwemer tried to make a new god, Numidium, using Kagrenac's tools and the sacred tones on Lorkhan's heart. The book describes the process by which tonal architecture could be used to forge mythopoeic enchantments that altered the very nature of reality. By reshaping the song of creation, it was by these methods that the Numidium was to be empowered, not merely with magical energy, but with divine essence drawn from the heart of a god. The Dwemer sought to reverse their subgradient devolution into mortals, to go back up from the mundane to the divine, and the Numidium was to be the vessel for this apotheosis. But now, let us speak of the aftermath of the disappearance and what became of the things the Dwemer left behind. The Numidium, incomplete and unpowered, remained dormant within Red Mountain after its creators vanished. Kagrenac's tools fell into the possession of the Chimer generals who had stormed the Heart Chamber: Nerevar, Vivek, Almalexia, Sotha-Sil, and Dagoth-Ur. What happened next is the subject of much dispute and many conflicting accounts, but what is known is that Nerevar died from his wounds, and the three generals who would become the tribunal used the tools to tap the Heart of Lorkhan and make themselves into living gods. For thousands of years, they drew power from the heart, maintaining their divinity and ruling over Morrowind as the tribunal. But Dagoth-Ur, who had been left to guard the tools and was believed to have died, eventually awakened beneath Red Mountain, corrupted by his contact with the heart, and began building his own version of the Numidium, a construct he called Akulakhan, the second Numidium. I must tell you of Akulakhan, for this construct was directly inspired by Kagrenac's original creation and was intended to serve similar purposes. Dagoth-Ur planned to use Akulakhan to drive all foreigners from Morrowind and then to conquer Tamriel, spreading his influence across the world through the divine power of the heart. He built the construct in the image of the Numidium, a colossal brass golem powered by the Heart of Lorkhan, and he connected himself to the heart so deeply that he could not be killed as long as it remained intact. In the year 3E 427, the Nerevarine, believed by many to be the reincarnation of Nerevar, journeyed to Red Mountain and destroyed the enchantments on the heart using Kagrenac's tools. Sunder, Keening, and Wraithguard were used once again upon the heart, and this time, instead of causing a disappearance, they severed the connection that gave Dagoth-Ur his power. The heart seemingly disappeared from the world, and Dagoth-Ur and Akulakhan were destroyed along with it. The tribunal lost their source of divinity as well, and the age of the living gods of Morrowind came to an end. Yet the original Numidium did not remain dormant forever. Allow me to speak of its later history, for the brass god was reactivated more than once after the Dwemer's disappearance, and each time it caused devastation beyond measure. As part of the armistice that brought Morrowind into the Empire, the Tribunal gave the Numidium to Tiber Septim, the man who would become Talos, god of mankind. The Tribunal did not include the Heart of Lorkhan as a power source, for it was the source of their own divine power. So a new power source was created, the Mantella, a soul gem infused with the soul of a Shezarene, an incarnation of Lorkhan's divine spirit. With this power source, Tiber Septim reactivated the Numidium and used it to complete his conquest of Tamriel, employing its devastating might against the Altmer of the Somerset Isles in a siege that may have broken time itself, creating a dragon break that caused the golem to fight against Altmeri mages across all points in time simultaneously. The Numidium was destroyed after this conquest, but the Mantella was hurled into Aetherius, and the golem was eventually reassembled by the Blades. In the year 3E417, an agent recovered the Mantella and reactivated the Numidium, causing a dragon break known as the Warp in the West. Multiple contradictory outcomes occurred simultaneously. The kings of Iliac Bay were defeated, preventing a major war. Orcs became citizens of the Empire. Manamarco, the Matafent, king of Worms, used a portion of the Numidium's power to ascend to godhood. The Underking was laid to rest, and the Numidium itself was destroyed. These events are all recorded as having happened, despite being mutually exclusive, because the activation of the Numidium shattered linear time and allowed all possibilities to become reality at once. This is the true power of the brass god. Not merely destruction, but the breaking of causality itself, the denial of the ordered universe that the gods created. If these facts has kept you listening this far, and you want more of these facts from Skyrim, hit that like button. It really motivates me to create more such videos. But there is still more to tell of the Dwemer's legacy, for their influence can be felt throughout Tamriel even in the Fourth Era. The city of Markarth in the Reach was built entirely within and upon Dwemer ruins. The stone buildings and brass fixtures of Nchuan Zel, repurposed for modern habitation, Understone Keep, the seat of the Jarl, comprises the exterior portions of the ancient Dwemer city, and excavations continue beneath the keep under Calselmo's direction. The architecture of Markarth is unique in Skyrim, its angular stone construction and metal fixtures reflecting its Dwemer origins, and visitors often remark on its alien beauty. Yet the city also inherits the dangers of its foundations, for Falmer infests the lower levels of Nchuan Zel, and expeditions into the depths rarely return intact. I shall now turn to the devices the Dwemer created to open the entrance to Blackreach, for these speak to their mastery of mechanical locks and security systems. Two devices were required: attunement spheres and dwarven mechanisms. The attunement sphere was a small, intricate orb that served as a key, while the dwarven mechanism was a complex lock built into the floor of certain ruins. By placing an attunement sphere into a dwarven mechanism, the entrance to Blackreach would be unlocked, revealing stairs leading down to the depths. These spheres are rare and highly sought after, for without them, the passages to Blackreach remain sealed. The scholar Septimus Cygnus, a brilliant but mad researcher who lived in the ice fields north of Winterhold, possessed one such sphere and used it to access Blackreach, though his obsession with unlocking a Dwemer lockbox he believed contained the Heart of Lorkhan eventually consumed him entirely. Allow me to speak of a particular Dwemer ruin that demonstrates the sophistication of their security systems, for the ruins of Kagrenac reveal much about their use of tonal architecture for defensive purposes. Kagrenac, located near Riften, translates to Music City in the Dwemer language, suggesting it was a place dedicated to the study and use of tonal forces. When travelers enter the already destroyed city, they find two deceased bandits who seemingly tried to gain access, but were killed by a strange glowing orb of light. This orb scans visitors before allowing them entry, and it appears to have some means of detecting whether the entrant can use tonal magic. The most likely explanation is that it recognizes the the voice, which is another form of tonal magic. Those who possess the ability to manipulate sound are permitted entry. Those who do not are killed. The ruin connects to deeper caverns infested with Falmer, and an unearthly rumbling occasionally shakes its foundations, suggesting that some Dwemer device continues to operate in the depths. Yet there is more to tell of the and its connection to Dwemer tonal architecture, for these are different expressions of the same fundamental principle. The used by the Nords and the dragons, manipulates reality through spoken words of power, shaping the world through sound just as the Dwemer did with their tools and devices. Green singing, used by the Bosmer, sword singing, used by the Red Guards, and tonal architecture are all forms of tonal magic, methods of altering reality by adding, removing, or changing parts of the song of creation. The Dwemer's approach was the most scientific, the most systematic, relying on precise tools and complex machinery rather than the spoken word. But the underlying principle was the same. Some scholars have suggested that the Dwemer disappeared partly due to tonal magic, whisked away to another plane of existence because of a particularly intense note produced when Kagrenac struck the Heart of Lorkhan. I must tell you of the tribunal god Sotha Sil, for he studied Dwemer tonal architecture more deeply than any other being and incorporated it into his own creations. Sotha Sil was one of the 3 tribunal gods who used Kagrenac's tools to achieve divinity, and he was the most inclined toward research and invention among them. He created the Clockwork City, a mechanical realm of his own design that drew heavily on Dwemer principles, and he developed his own versions of Dwemer technology, improving upon their designs in some cases. He refined Dwemer tonal forks and created items based on their research, such as the resonant sphere, one of his minor marvels, which produces an aural response upon applying magic to it and chimes with a sound similar to the ones that ring in his brass fortress. Sotha Sil's creations, known as fabricants and factotums, are similar to Dwemer animunculi, but are considered distinct from them, representing his own advancement of the principles the Dwemer pioneered. But now, let us speak of what remains in the Dwemer ruins for those who dare to explore them, for the treasures and dangers within these ancient places draw adventurers from across Tamriel despite the risks. The ruins are filled with Dwemer artifacts that can be smelted into dwarven metal ingots at any forge, materials that remain valuable for crafting armor and weapons of considerable quality. Bent Dwemer scrap metal, large decorative Dwemer struts, large Dwemer plate metal, small Dwemer plate metal, solid Dwemer metal, Dwemer gears, Dwemer gyros, and Dwemer cogs can all be found scattered throughout the ruins, left where their owners set them down over 3,000 years ago. These materials retain their integrity despite the passage of ages, testament to the Dwemer's metallurgical mastery. Adventurers also seek the soul gems that power the automatons, which can be retrieved from destroyed constructs along with dwarven oil and centurion dynamo cores, components that fetch good prices for merchants and enchanters. Allow me to tell you about the traps that protect these ruins, for the Dwemer were as ingenious in defense as they were in all other matters. Spinning blade traps emerge from the walls and floors to slice at intruders. Dwarven ballistae firebolts at anyone who triggers pressure plates or tripwires. Steam vents release scalding vapor that can cook an armored warrior alive within their own protection. Flame traps spray fire across corridors and chambers. These defenses continue to function millennia after their creators vanished, maintained by the tireless automatons that patrol the halls. Some traps are triggered by tonal resonators that must be struck in the correct sequence. Failing to produce the proper harmony results in attacks from Dwemer constructs or barrages of arrows. The resonators spin when activated, creating unique sounds, and when their harmonics hit a particular frequency or produce a certain harmony, they unlock doors and deactivate defenses. Those who do not understand Dwemer tonal principles must rely on trial and error, often a fatal approach. I shall now turn to the matter of Dwemer books and the challenges of translating them. For the Dwemer left behind extensive written records that remain largely incomprehensible. Dwemerus, the Dwemer language, uses a unique alphabet and grammar structure that few scholars have mastered. Calcelmo has made the most progress in translation, creating a translation guide based on a Rosetta Stone he discovered that contained both Dwemerus and Falmer text. Yet even with this guide, much of Dwemer writing remains opaque, filled with technical terminology and philosophical concepts that have no equivalent in modern languages. The books that have been translated reveal tantalizingly incomplete information. Divine metaphysics describes the creation of gods through sorcery, but does not explain exactly what Kagrenac did. The Egg of Time argues theoretical points about divine power, but reaches conclusions that appear to have been catastrophically wrong. Hanging Gardens is little more than a tourist guide, useful for translating other texts, but containing little information of substance. Yet there is more to tell of the written legacy of the Dwemer, for some texts have survived in translation or were written by other races about Dwemer subjects. The scholar Marobar Sewell wrote a series of books called Ancient Tales of the Dwemer, fictional stories that present the Dwemer in a comfortable, familiar light that bears little resemblance to their true nature. As Hasfat Antibalas observed, the public prefers this light, trivial version of the vanished race, finding the real Dwemer too alien and unlikable to contemplate. Taran Dreth wrote the Aetherium Wars, a scholarly account of the conflict between the 4 Dwemer city-states, though his work was based on research stolen from his colleague Catria, who died in Arkenthams, pursuing the truth of the Aetherium Forge. Ursa Uthrax wrote the Falmer, a study, recounting the war between the Dwemer and their former slaves based on first-hand exploration of Blackreach. These texts provide valuable information, but are filtered through the perspectives and limitations of their non-Dwemer authors. Allow me to speak of a device called the lexicon, for this represents one of the most remarkable achievements of Dwemer engineering. A lexicon is a portable cube that can store vast amounts of information, including the contents of an Elder Scroll. The Dwemer created these devices to read Elder Scrolls without suffering the blindness or madness that normally afflicts those who look upon them directly. A lexicon could be inserted into an oculary, which would then transfer the knowledge of the scroll onto the cube, allowing it to be studied safely. In the 4th era, the scholar Septimus Signus sought a lexicon inscribed with the contents of an Elder Scroll, believing it held the key to unlocking a Dwemer lockbox he had discovered. An adventurer retrieved this lexicon from the Tower of Mzark in Blackreach and brought it to Septimus, who used its contents to attempt to access what he believed was the Heart of Lorkhan. He was wrong. The box contained the Ogma Infinium, a Daedric artifact created by Hermaeus Mora, and Septimus was destroyed by the forbidden knowledge within. But now, let us speak of the cubes that powered Dwemer cities, for these devices demonstrate the sophistication of their energy. Systems. Dwarven power cubes, also known as control cubes, were used to maintain city infrastructure, controlling various power systems that kept the cities stable and functional. The Dwemer of Nchardak, on Solstheim, used many of these cubes to operate their city, including a power system that supplied energy to their massive library, known as the Reading Room. When the cubes were removed or depleted, sections of the city would lose power and flood or become inaccessible. In the 4th era, travelers seeking a Black Book of Hermaeus Mora had to restore the cubes to Nchardak's boilers to drain the flooded sections and gain access to the Reading Room. The cubes continue to function after thousands of years, though their power is finite and can be exhausted if used improperly. I must now turn your attention to the Dwemer presence beyond Skyrim and Morrowind, for their civilization extended across much of Tamriel. The Lorkhan clan of Dwemer chose self-exile over staying in Morrowind, following the formation of the First Council, refusing to ally with the Chimer. According to legend, King Lorkhan threw the artifact Volendrung, a massive Dwemer warhammer, across the horizon and vowed to found his city where it landed. It landed in the region that would become Hammerfell, and there the Lorkhan established Volenfell, their capital, from which the province takes its name. The Dwemer of Hammerfell built extensive ruins throughout the region, maintaining their distinctive architectural style and technological sophistication. When the disappearance occurred, it claimed these Dwemer as well, leaving their cities as empty as those in Morrowind and Skyrim. Yet, there is more to tell of the Dwemer's reach, for they established settlements in High Rock as well, though these are less well documented. Ruins have been found throughout that province, containing the same automatons, traps, and artifacts as those in other regions. The Dwemer appear to have maintained communication and trade between their settlements across Tamriel, sharing knowledge and resources despite the distances involved. How they accomplished this remains unclear, though the calling may have allowed instantaneous communication between Dwemer in different provinces. The uniformity of their technology across such vast distances suggests a highly organized civilization with standardized practices and designs, a level of coordination that no other race in Tamriel has achieved. Allow me to tell you about the fail-safes the Dwemer built into their most precious artifacts, for these reveal their attention to security even across the boundaries of their own civilization. Kagrenac's tools were protected by a system of drones, automatons programmed to retrieve the artifacts if they were taken out of Morrowind. A tuneless and quiet singing would activate this Tamriel-wide network when the tools were removed from the province, and the drones would seek them out, retrieve them, and deposit them in a vault until a tonal architect could come to claim them. In the early Fourth Era, when Sunder and Wraithguard were being smuggled through Skyrim into Hammerfell using refugees fleeing the Red Year as cover, some of the caravan captains betrayed their employer and handed the artifacts over to the drones. A scholar tracking the items found them in a vault located in Sightless Pit near Winterhold, but became trapped within and died before she could organize a retrieval expedition. The tools remained there until they were recovered by an adventurer in 4E 201. But now, let us speak of the state of keening in the Fourth Era, for the dagger's condition raises questions about the nature of Kagrenac's tools. When keening was recovered for Arniel Gain's experiment, it was no longer dangerous to wield without Wraithguard. In the Third Era, holding keening without the gauntlet would cause rapid health drain that could kill the wielder within seconds. But by the Fourth Era, this effect had faded. Similarly, when Sunder and Wraithguard were recovered from Sightless Pit, they too had lost their lethality. This suggests that the enchantments on the tools have weakened over the centuries, possibly because they are no longer connected to the Heart of Lorkhan, which vanished when the Nerevarine destroyed its enchantments. Without the heart to sustain them, the tools may be slowly losing their power, fading into ordinary artifacts rather than the divine instruments they once were. I shall now turn to the connection between the Dwemer disappearance and the ghosts that haunt their ruins, for this relationship may provide insight into what happened to them. Dwarven ghosts are aggressive revenant spirits encountered in ancient Dwemer ruins, present on the mortal plane, despite the fact that the Dwemer should have passed to whatever afterlife awaits the souls of Mer. Their presence suggests that the Dwemer did not achieve transcendence or escape to another realm but died in some manner that bound their spirits to their ruins. Yet the ghosts appeared to be absent from the ruins during certain periods and present during others, their manifestations seemingly connected to the existence of the Numidium or its copies. When Dagethur built Akulakan and began drawing power from the Heart of Lorkhan, Dwemer ghosts appeared in the ruins of Morrowind. When Lorkhan was destroyed, the ghosts faded. This suggests that the Dwemer spirits are bound to their god, the Numidium, and manifest when a version of it exists to anchor them to the mortal plane. Yet there is more to tell of this theory, for it has implications for the fate of the Dwemer race. If the Dwemer souls are bound to the Numidium, then they may have succeeded in their goal of becoming part of a god, merging their spirits into a collective oversoul that serves as the divine skin of the brass god. This would mean the Dwemer are not dead in the conventional sense, but exist as a component of the Numidium forever, bound to the construct they created. When the Numidium is active, their souls can manifest as ghosts in the ruins they once inhabited. When it is destroyed or dormant, they are trapped within it, unable to interact with the mortal world. The destruction of the Numidium during the warp in the west may have trapped the Dwemer souls permanently, with no vessel to anchor them and no way to manifest. If this is true, then the Dwemer achieved their apotheosis, but at the cost of their individual existence, becoming a single entity rather than a race of separate beings. Allow me to speak of the prophecy that mentions the Numidium, for the brass god appears in the prophecy of the Dragonborn as one of the signs heralding the return of Alduin, the World Eater. The prophecy states that when the brass tower walks and time is reshaped, it will be one of several events presaging the dragon's return. Alduin's Wall, an ancient Akaviri mural at Sky Haven Temple, depicts this prophecy in carvings that show the Numidium alongside other events. The shattering of the Staff of Chaos, the disaster at Red Mountain, the Oblivion Crisis, and the Civil War in Skyrim. The fact that the Numidium appears in prophecy alongside these cataclysmic events speaks to its significance in the history and future of Tamriel. Some believe the Numidium will return again, that the Dwemer's god is not truly destroyed, but merely waiting for the proper circumstances to rise once more. But now, let us speak of the possibility that the Dwemer might return, for this is a question that has occupied scholars and dreamers for thousands of years. Yagrum Bagarn has suggested that the Dwemer may not be gone forever, but merely transported to some distant realm, from which they may someday return to threaten or aid the people of Tamriel once more. The tribunal counseled preserving Kagrenac's tools in case the Dwemer returned and posed a danger, recognizing that a race capable of vanishing in an instant might be capable of returning just as suddenly. The fact that the Dwemer's disappearance was connected to their attempt to transcend mortal existence raises the possibility that they succeeded and now exist in a state beyond our comprehension, capable of returning when they choose or when certain conditions are met. I must tell you of the theories that the Dwemer were displaced in time rather than destroyed or transformed, for this would explain some of the mysteries surrounding their disappearance. Just as Alduin was cast forward in time by the ancient Nords using an Elder Scroll, the Dwemer may have been displaced to another point in history, either past or future. If so, they did not perish but were removed from their own era, existing somewhere else in the timeline where they cannot be reached or contacted. This would explain why Yagrum Bagarn, who was outside Mundus at the time of the disappearance, was not affected. The displacement operated on the flow of time within the mortal plane and could not reach him in the outer realm. It would also explain the piles of ash in the ruins, which may be residue from the temporal displacement rather than the remains of Dwemer bodies. Yet the gods may have punished the Dwemer for their sacrilege, and this theory cannot be discounted. The Daedric prince Azura despised the Dwemer for their defiance of the divine order and their mistreatment of the Chimer. The tale of Azura and the box recounts how a Dwemer mage attempted to trick Azura by asking her to guess what was in a box, intending to prove that the gods were not omniscient. Azura guessed incorrectly, but only because the Dwemer cheated, changing the contents of the box after she answered. Some versions of this tale suggest that Azura destroyed the Dwemer race in retaliation for this insult, extinguishing them in a fit of divine pique. Whether or not this specific tale is true, It reflects the enmity between Azura and the Dwemer and raises the possibility that the Daedra had a hand in their disappearance. If you are really enjoying these facts, leave a like. It's the only way I know you liked the video. And so we come to the end of what can be told, for the mystery of the Dwemer's disappearance remains unsolved after more than 3,000 years. The evidence points in many directions: transcendence, annihilation, displacement, divine punishment, or something else entirely that mortal minds cannot comprehend. The Dwemer sought to escape the limitations of the mortal plane and to become something greater than the gods who created them, and in pursuing this goal, they vanished from existence. Whether they succeeded or failed, whether they achieved their apotheosis or destroyed themselves in the attempt, no one can say with certainty. The only Dwemer who survived does not know what happened, and he has spent millennia searching for an answer that has never come. What we do know is that the Dwemer left behind a legacy that continues to shape Tamriel. Their ruins dot the landscape of multiple provinces. Their automatons continue their eternal patrols. Their artifacts remain among the most powerful and sought-after items in the world. The Aetherium Forge still functions beneath Bathoft, capable of creating artifacts of immense power. The Ocularies still operate, collecting starlight and storing knowledge. The great lifts still descend to Blackreach, where the silent city stands empty beneath the glowing ceiling of the cavern. Markarth still rises from the stone of Nchuan-Zel, a living city built upon the bones of a dead civilization. The Dwemer are gone, but they are not forgotten, and their works endure as testament to what they achieved before they reached too far and paid the ultimate price. Perhaps the mystery is best left unsolved. Perhaps the truth of what happened to the Dwemer would be too terrible or too incomprehensible for mortal minds to bear. The Numidium was a weapon of denial, a construct that refused the existence of everything it encountered, and those who created it may have shared that fate, denying their own existence until they ceased to be. Or perhaps they achieved exactly what they sought, escaping the prison of Mundus and ascending to a state of being that we cannot perceive or understand. In either case, the lesson of the Dwemer is clear, that knowledge and power without wisdom lead to destruction, that defying the gods carries consequences, and that some mysteries are not meant to be solved. And yet, the search continues. Scholars like Calcelmo spend their lives piecing together fragments of Dwemer knowledge, hoping to understand what the Dwemer understood, to unlock the secrets they unlocked. Adventurers delve into the ruins, seeking treasure and power, following in the footsteps of the vanished race. Mages study tonal architecture and attempt to replicate Dwemer feats of engineering and magic. And somewhere in Telfir, Yagrum Bagarn waits, bloated and sick with corpus, his mechanical legs carrying him through his endless captivity, still hoping that someday he will find another of his kind, still believing that the mystery of his people's disappearance will one day be solved. 3,000 years he has waited, and 3,000 more may pass before the truth is known, if it is ever known at all. The fires burn low now, and the winds of Skyrim howl louder beyond these walls. The tale is told, such as it can be told, and what remains is silence and shadow and the endless patience of stone. The Dwemer are gone, vanished into the abyss of history, and only their works remain to speak of what they were. Take from this tale what lessons you will, and remember the Dwemer when you walk through their empty cities, when you face their tireless automatons, when you find their artifacts still gleaming after all these centuries. They sought to become gods, and perhaps they succeeded, or perhaps they simply ceased to exist, erased from the world by their own ambition. The truth lies buried with them, wherever they have gone, and it may never rise again. Sleep now, if sleep will come, and dream of brass towers and golden tones, of hearts divine and tools profane, of a race that reached for the stars and vanished in the reaching. The mystery endures and will endure until the last ruin crumbles and the last automaton falls silent. And even then, the question will remain, What happened to the Dwemer? Perhaps someday, someone will find the answer. Perhaps that someone will be you.